Hello, this is Raymond Mayfield. Great to be back with you today. Appreciate you listening so much. You can find me on the World Wide Web, rmayfield.com. You can also find me raymondmayfield.com. You can also punch in my names in several outlets, Raymond Mayfield. It'll pull up all my videos that are on those sites. I do have two counseling places, counselorofpeace.com and counselorsoftruth.com, and I do interviews over the telephone and talk with people with their needs, and I'd be glad to discuss with you any kind of problem that you might have. I have many years of experience doing that. I want to speak to you about Job today in the Old Testament. I want to speak to you about a man that had many trials. And the trials that he had were very severe. Job 1:1 said, "And there was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and stayed away from evil." The Bible tells us he was a very wealthy man. He owned thousands of livestock. He had a large family of 7 sons and 3 daughters. And Job cared for his family and offered burnt offerings on their birthdays every year. For Job said, "Perhaps my sons have sinned and turned away from God in their hearts." And Job practiced this continually. We need to continually pray for our children today. It is sad in some households there's no prayer goes on anywhere. And if there's ever a time where we need to pray for our families, it's today. With all of the drug problems going on, with all the things that are going on around the world, we need prayer surrounding our families today, and we need to plead the blood up on our families today. There was a meeting in the heavenlies between Satan and God, and the Lord asked Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? He is the finest man in all the earth, and he loves God, and he's a good man who fears God, and will have nothing to do with evil." In essence, Satan said, "Why shouldn't he be when you pay him so well?" Satan says, "You have always protected him and his home." And Satan said to the Lord, "Take away all of his wealth, and you will see him curse you to his face," in verse number 11. You know, there's nothing wrong with having money. God blessed Job in a wonderful way and gave him all of his wealth. He had built a hedge around him, and he loved him so much. But Satan says, if you take all this away from him, he will curse you. Then the Lord said, you can take away his wealth, but don't harm him physically. And Job's donkeys and even oxen were stolen immediately. His farm hands were killed. His sheep and herdsmen were killed. His camels were stolen. His servants were killed. Then Job loses all of his children in a mighty windstorm. Folks, I want to tell you, that's tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. And it seemed like just one thing after another kept just throwing in his way. And Satan was responsible for all of these things. God allowed this to happen to Job. It was a test of his faith, and it was a mighty test of his faith, but Job is going to win out in the end. And finally, then Job loses, when he loses all of his children and in a mighty windstorm, Job did something that's very dramatic. He arose and rent his mantle and shaved his head and fell down on the ground, and he worshiped. Folks, I want to tell you, we can worship God regardless of what happens to us. I once have preached many years ago, could I serve God if I was going through excruciating pain? There have been people that have done that in the past, and by God's grace, if you're going through a kind of pain today, excruciating pain, God can help you. God can heal you. God can deliver you. He can give you victory over that pain that's going through your body. Don't allow Satan to get victory over your life. Don't allow him to move into your mind or into your territory. And Job rent his clothes and his mantle and shaved shaved his head and he fell down and worshiped. I want you to remember that. And he goes on to say, naked I came out of my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. And the Lord gave, and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord, in verse number 21. And all of that, the Bible says in verse 22 that Job sinned not, neither did he charge God foolishly. In fact, the matter goes on to say, after that Satan afflicted Job with boils, and he had boils from the top of his head to the sole of his feet. And his wife said, why don't you just curse God and die? His whole family turned against him. His wife turned against him. And I'm going to continue this series and talk about his friends that are even going to say some terrible things to him. And God help us today through all the trials that many of you face today. God's going to give us victory. Hold on to God's unchanging hand. God is going to give you victory. If you're going through some terrible storms, physically, financially, or whatever it is today, remember God is going to help you and he's going to bring you through it. Hold on to God's unchanging hand and he will bless you and help you. This is Raymond Mayfield, and I'll talk to you again real soon, and may God richly bless you.